This is CJ Baker, and every day I listen to a different randomly generated album that appears in the book 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. And I just finished my 14th week. So just like I have with previous weeks, I've decided I'll release a weekly recap video. So the recaps are basically previous videos that I recorded, but because they were recorded as shorts and some of them had to be edited, there will be some additional bonus content. And just like I have in previous weeks, afterwards, I'll give my general observations of the albums that I listened to this week. I'll give the updated rankings, and we'll answer the question, do these albums that I reviewed this week belong in the book? Before we get into it, if you want me to keep making these videos, please like and subscribe and have your notifications turned on so you don't miss future videos. Please enjoy. This randomly generated album is Back at the Chicken Shack by Jimmy Smith, released in 1963. So the album also includes saxophonist Stanley Turrentine, guitarist Kenny Burrell, and drummer Donald Bailey. And it was released on the influential Blue Note label. Jimmy Smith was an organist and band leader, and he was a fairly influential organist. So prior to Jimmy Smith, the B3 Hammond organ was mostly associated with church playing. So he revolutionized it a bit, like it's pretty innovative. And he now incorporated as a jazz instrument. So we'll get into this album. So it opened fairly strong with the opening track, Back at the Chicken Shack. So that tune has some really good grooves to it. The rest of the album, it does start to blend together a bit. So the original album had 4 tracks, about 37 minutes long, and it almost kind of feels like one long track, which I don't necessarily have a problem with, but I tried listening to the album on a couple of occasions, and both times I found my mind starting to drift a bit. It was hard to focus. So that's the one thing I will say about this type of music, at least with myself. It's really good background music, so it'd be good if you want to play it at a dinner party and sound sophisticated. Good choice. But if the one and only task I'm doing is listening to music, this is not really the type of thing I would gravitate towards. And also, it is a bit on the smooth side, which is good if you're someone who loves smooth jazz. But I tend to gravitate more towards jazz that's a bit more adventurous and a bit more avant garde because I find for myself that's the type of jazz that's more likely to capture my attention. But I also need to acknowledge I'm not a jazz aficionado in any stretch of the imagination. I have a respect for it, I can appreciate it, but I don't know the difference between good and bad jazz. I only know if I personally like and connect with it. So ultimately, at the end of the day, you can take what I say with a grain of salt, person's opinion, so it's not too deep. But overall, I didn't mind the album. It was decent. Other than maybe one something in the background, it's not something I'd be inclined to listen to. But like I said, didn't hate it. I give it 3.5 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Hysteria by Def Leppard, released in 1987. This was a massive album which featured 7 singles. Even though this is the first time listening to the album, I was familiar with more than half of the songs. So listening to it as a kid, I didn't necessarily mind it. But once I got into my teens and got into Nirvana, grunge, alternative rock, this type of music was the anti-Nirvana in the 90s. People would talk about how Nirvana killed hair metal. I don't know if it's entirely accurate to call Def Leppard hair metal because they didn't have the same level of glitz and glamour, but musically speaking, there was a similar level of gloss. So at the very least, this was hair metal adjacent. So when I got in my teens, I started to hate bands like Def Leppard. And maybe some of that was a bit of me being like too cool for school. So the question is, how do I feel about this album and this music as an adult? I will admit, going into this, I was really dreading listening to this. But yeah, we'll just get right into it. And we'll start with some of like the more well-known tunes. As far as the singles go, you do got songs like Rocket and Armageddon it, which are both generic, sound very similar to each other and are interchangeable. Then there's songs like Animal, Love Bites, the title track. I don't hate any of those songs, but I don't have any desire to listen to any of those songs.
Spinal Tap really sucks lately.
Then there's Pour Some Sugar on Me. Pour some sugar on me. I really hate that song. Pour some sugar on me. That song really sucks. I can't stand that song. It's a good thing I don't go to the strip club. But my favorite songs on the album are the deep cuts. Maybe it's because of the lack of familiarity. We like the song Gods of War, which is an outlier on the album. It shows that the band does have the potential to have a bit more substance that most of the songs lack. So the song's a protest song in connection with the Cold War, and it does express concerns over nuclear annihilation. And there's a couple of other tracks that I don't mind, like Don't Shoot Shotgun and Run Riot. They are a little bit cheesy and dated, but they are kind of fun. And I went into this prepared to totally slay on the album, but I didn't hate it as much as I thought I would. I didn't even hate it. I didn't love it either. But yeah, 3 stars. Still have no desire to listen to it ever again. Today's randomly generated album is Regatta de Blanc, the sophomore album by the Police, released in 1979. I don't mind the Police. They have a decent number of songs I like, even a couple songs that I love. I do prefer the Police as a band over Sting solo work. And I also like Stuart Copeland's work as a drummer. We'll get into this album. I'll say my one issue at times with the Police actually connects with the title of the album. So Regatta de Blanc loosely translates to white reggae. There are times where that reggae sound it does come across as somewhat watered down and inauthentic. And I'm not even saying that white rock bands shouldn't incorporate reggae in their sound. Like, for example, one of my favorite bands is The Clash. And obviously, The Clash are heavily influenced by reggae and have covered reggae songs. So I think there is a way to do it, and I think it can work. And there are times with the Police where I don't always mind it, but there's other times where it does fall flat for me. We'll get into this album. It opens really strong. So I talk about songs that I love by the Police. This is one of them, Message in a Bottle, definite banger. Send it out an SOS to the world. I hope that someone gets I hope that someone gets my message in a bottle. Yeah. Love that song. My least favorite song on the album is probably the second most well-known tune, Rockin' on the Moon. So that's an example of when I don't like the white reggae, it's very watered down and the song's just really cheesy to me. So a couple of other songs on the album that I don't mind. Bring On the Night's a decent track. I also really like The Bed's Too Big Without You. That's an example when I don't mind the reggae sound, but at one time thought that this was a cover. I didn't realize it was an original because the first time I heard the song, it was actually Sheila Hilton's version, which appeared on a reggae compilation that I had. But yeah, I don't mind that song. As far as the rest of the songs on the album, they're kind of just there. They're okay. Don't really like them or hate them. Overall, the album's decent. I'll give it 3.5 stars. Today's randomly generated album is After the Gold Rush by Neil Young, released in 1970. So I'm a huge Neil Young fan. I think I've mentioned it in previous videos. The first concert I went was a Neil Young Pearl Jam double bill at the now defunct Exhibition Stadium in Toronto. And at the time, I was more of a Pearl Jam fan, but I became a huge Neil Young fan after seeing him perform live. But we'll get right into this album. So it opens really strong with Tell Me Why, really solid opener. And then the next track is After the Gold Rush. Absolutely gorgeous tune. It'll probably be a stretch to call this a direct protest song, but it does address environmental themes, which is a pet topic of Neil Young. And then after that, we got Only Love Could Break Your Heart. Absolutely gorgeous, heartbreaking tune. And then we got Southern Men. So those are the first four songs on the album. So it opens really strong. And the entire album's all cure no fill. So I could basically, if I wanted to, which I won't do, I could just read every song off the track listed. But concerning Southern Man, that song basically is a protest song. It was written in response to racism in the American South. And in connection with that, Leonard Skinner wrote the song Sweet Home Alabama in response to both Southern Man and the song Alabama, which appears on Neil Young's 1972 album, Office. But yeah, like I said, the entire album's strong. Other highlights, Don't Let It Bring You Down, Birds, When You Can Dance, I Can Really Love, which is a bit more upbeat. So it's good that there's a couple of mid-tempo songs because it really helps break things up a bit because the album is very mellow. And it's mellow in a good way, but it's good to have a couple of songs just to kind of switch it up just to make sure that it doesn't become too one note. So yeah, absolute classic, a landmark album, easy 5 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Smoker's Delight by Nightmares on Racks, released in 1995. So we got some UK trip hop, and I do like a lot of trip hop. Like I do enjoy artists such as Massive Attack, Portishead, Tricky. And no, you don't have to be on drugs to enjoy this type of music. I'm not on drugs, never did drugs. In my teens, my pupils were just naturally dilated, but they're not dilated now. But yeah, but getting back to this album, overall, I like the vibe of the album. It's very chill. The one thing I will say it is the type of album that it's very tricky to highlight specific tracks that stand out because it all does kind of blend together. And the album is mostly instrumental. So it is the type of album that's very easy for my mind to wander. And I've had a few other albums like that, and quite often they're albums that are heavily instrumental because without having like vocals and I mean some of the songs do have some vocals, but without having actual like lyrics, it's one less thing to kind of focus on. Yeah, so a lot of times with other albums where my mind is kind of drift, I just went back and re-listened to it a second or third time. But in this case, the album was just like an hour and 40 minutes, so it was way too long. I wasn't gonna listen to it again. So if I zoned out, then I zoned out and I just missed a portion of the album. So yeah, it is what it is, but it's not necessarily an album I want to go back and listen to. I mean, maybe if I just want something chill in the background. And it is something that would be decent background music, but otherwise, for my personal taste, if the only thing I want to do is listen to music, this is not something I'm going to gravitate towards. But there's nothing that I disliked about it. So for what it was still a decent album. I'll give it 3.5 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Electric by the Call, released in 1987. So this is the band's third album. It also happens to be the only album by them in the book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. And that doesn't surprise me at all. I don't even think they necessarily need more than one album, if they even need one album. But what does surprise me is the fact that this is the one album. I think if they were to have an album in the book, it would be their 1985 sophomore album, Love. From everything I gather, that album tends to be more well received. I know the album Love does have a higher user rated on Rate Your Music. I also personally think Love's the much stronger album. In Love also as She Sells Sanctuary, which is an absolute all-time banger. But that being said, we will get into this album. And this album is a bit of a departure for the band. So they start to drift away from their previous goth rock, post-punk sound, and they adopt a more straightforward, I would say even almost generic hard rock sound. But yeah, we'll get into the actual tracks. I do like the opening song, Wildflower. That's a solid tune. Also, Love Removal Machine is also a really strong tune. So there are a couple of really strong heavy rock tunes. And it was produced by Rick Rubin, like along with hip hop. Rick Rubin has produced a lot of like notable heavy rock bands too. So he kind of helped them a bit with that sound, but I do think also at times the sound was just a tad bit generic. So other than these two songs, everything else on the album to me was just kind of okay. I didn't really like it or hate it, with the exception of one track. There is one track I absolutely hate it. It's the cover of Steppenwolf's Born to Be Wild. That's absolutely horrendous. That's terrible. It's absolute garbage. But other than that, the album's fine. Like I said already, I think Love is the stronger album. So if there was going to be an album by them on the list, I think they picked the wrong one. But the album, it's all right. I gave it 3.5 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers by Wu-Tang Clan. But in order to watch that review, you're gonna need to join my Ko-fi or coffee, because the idea is you support creators by buying them a digital cup of coffee, but it's spelled KO dash FI. So I recently started a membership for $5. So for the price of a digital cup of coffee, you get exclusive bonus content, which includes once a month I'm going to select one randomly generated album as a Ko-fi exclusive. And there's going to be other exclusives as well. And I already have a couple of interviews posted back when I was hosting the podcast Ongoing History of Protest Music. Also, for those that join my Ko-fi, you also will be able to select other albums that I review. So I'm going to start posting reviews of non-randomly generated albums that are going to be selected by members. And you might even be able to have a say in other content as well. So like I said, it's Ko-fi. So it's ko/fi.com/my epic soundtrack. And I appreciate all support and I love you all. So that concludes the weekly recap. And overall, not a bad week. There was 2 5-star albums, but there was nothing else over 4 stars. So there was like 4 3.5-star albums and a 3-star album. So it wasn't the worst week, but there's also been better weeks. But yeah, we'll check out the updated rankings now. But yeah, we'll start scrolling through the rankings. So we got a couple of new 5-star albums. So we see Wu-Tang Clan. And we also got Neil Young After the Gold Rush. So yeah, I love Neil Young After the Gold Rush, but he actually has a few albums that I like better than After the Gold Rush. So we'll scroll down some more. And like I mentioned, there's no 4-star albums or no 4.5-star albums. So we'll scroll down to the 3.5 stars. So none of these ratings have changed. So yeah, so we got a couple of new 3.5-star albums. We got Jimmy Smith at 62. The Police at 63. Nightmares on Rocks at 67. And we got The Cult at 73. And then we got one 3-star album. So Def Leppard, Hysteria. And then we scroll down, no change at the bottom. I still absolutely hate Squiddy Politty. So that's the updated rankings. So now we're going to ask the question we ask every week. Do the albums I review this week belong in the book 1001 albums you must hear before you die? And of course, no issues with the two 5-star albums, Neil Young After the Gold Rush, absolute classic, Enter the Wu-Tang, one of the most important hip hop albums of all time. As far as the other albums, I mostly don't have any major issues, like no issue with Jimmy Smith. I already mentioned the video how he was a influential organist. He kind of revolutionized the B-free Hammond organ, turning it from like a church instrument to like a jazz instrument. And as far as the other albums, we got the Police. Police overall an important influential band. I'm not sure if this is considered the most important influential album, but I don't have a big issue with it. Nightmare on Rocks. I think that's considered a fairly important trip hop album, so I don't have a huge issue. The Cult, I already mentioned in my video review. If there was going to be a Cult album, I think they picked the wrong one. It should have been Love. So that might be the only one I'll dispute. My least favorite album was Def Leppard, Hysteria. I mean, you could possibly dispute how influential it is. I don't think there's a huge amount of bands that were inspired to start a band because of Def Leppard. But I could be wrong there. But it was a massive album, so I can kind of understand why it's in the book. So let me know in the comments what you think of my rankings. Also, let me know what you think of my reviews this week. Let me know if you think I'm an idiot, but please do so respectfully. And if you want me to keep making content like this, please like and subscribe. And make sure you have your notifications turned on so you don't miss any future videos. And also feel free to check out my website, Ongoing History of ProtestSongs.com. Thanks for watching, and please stay safe.